San Diego is still absorbing the fallout from the resignation of its first progressive mayor. What were the motivations of the three progressive leaders who brought down Bob Filner? Is the tension between heavy industry and homeowners finally resolved in Barrio Logan? And assisted living facilities are supposed to provide care and safety for seniors, but all too often they fail. That's all coming up on the KPBS Roundtable. Welcome. I'm Alison St. John, and I'm joined at the round table today by Dave Rowland, editor of City Beat, Sandhya Dirks, KPBS Metro reporter, and Deborah Schock of the Center for Health Reporting at USC. Thank you so much for joining us. There has been plenty of speculation about how the groundswell of calls for Bob Filner to resign began. The House of Cards began to crumble on June 11th when former City Councilwoman Donna Frye and environmental attorneys Corey Briggs and Marco Gonzalez held a news conference. Questions linger about why did three progressive Democrats wait so long, and why did they eventually decide to break the silence around Filner's behaviour toward women? So, Dave, you interviewed Frye, Briggs and Gonzalez at length for your piece in City Beat. What did you want to find out from them that you didn't already know?
Well, mostly I wanted to find out what was going on sort of on the inside. What were their motivations? What were they thinking as each step unfolded? Was it, they've gotten there's been a lot of sort of conspiracy theories surrounding this effort. And so I guess I wanted to set out to either show that there was a grand conspiracy or there was not. And what was interesting to me was that they really never wanted to go public at all. They never wanted this thing to be public. They thought, probably a little bit foolishly, I think they would admit at this point, that they thought that they could send Bob Filner some private letters saying, we know what you've been doing, you know better than we do what you've been doing, and you need to go quietly, or this will be a big spectacle. And they didn't want the spectacle, but it turned out to be one.
Okay, so as we'll talk about, they did in fact try to do something before they went public. But just at this point, when you talk to them, how easy or difficult is it for them now to talk about this?
It was easy for them, and I think they even joked several times during our interviews about that it was sort of therapy for them to kind of decompress and get it all out there and really talk it through. I think this was the first time they'd really gotten together to really just sort of go over it and debrief on the whole thing.
So like you said, some people, I think, criticize them for perhaps not taking other steps, for not dealing with this situation less publicly. What steps did they take before they went public?
Well, it was mostly, at first it was Donna Frye, when she was a member of the mayor's staff as his director of open government, went to Vince Hall, Bob Filner's chief of staff, and several times, and said, I'm hearing these stories. Here's what I'm hearing. I think you need to deal with this. You need to talk to Bob, and you need to figure out what's going on, and you need to fix this problem. At this point, she was hearing stories about the mayor hitting on women at events where he was attending as the mayor. She found that highly inappropriate, especially when he was staffed with staff members who she felt were sort of unfairly burdened with witnessing this sort of behavior, plus stories that he would bring women back to the mayor's office after hours, and she thought that was inappropriate. So she went with these stories and rumors to him before she resigned in late March.
But then when she resigned, she actually told Vince Hall that she would provide them with a convenient cover story so that, it would look like there was a reason other than this. And Sandhya, I'm wondering why you think Donna Frye wouldn't have come public then, or why did she wait? Why did she provide a cover story when she resigned from her position at City Hall?
Well, something you said in the article in your reporting was that part of this was that, they're very different kinds of rumors when you're talking about somebody doing consensual infidelity or somebody actually using the power of their office to harass women. And I think for Donna Frye, there was a line that got crossed at some point in what she was hearing. I also think, look, these are progressives. This was the first Democratic mayor mayor in 20 years, and people were really excited that things might be changing politically in San Diego. So, you don't kind of want to commit political suicide in that way. And that's what ended up having to happen. It was friendly fire that took Filner down.
Yeah, and this is actually something that Corey Briggs in particular got very emotional about when we talked. I mean, he broke down and he he wasn't sobbing or anything, but he got choked up and teared up over especially talking about this pivotal lunch meeting that they had on July 9th, where they talked about whether they were being hypocrites if they didn't do something about what they knew.
This was a meeting between the three of them, not with the mayor.
That's right. Yes, between the three of them, they had a lunch meeting, and they really talked about who are we if we don't do something about this. And Corey talks about how the idea of looking at their progressive friends and their allies and saying we have to do something about this, even though, as you say, this was the first really true progressive mayor in some time, and it was finally a chance to get some of their progressive policy done, and it was very emotional for them.
You write about what you call, or they call, the Twilight Zone meeting, which they actually got with the mayor, the three of them. Tell us about that.
This was actually, it was Marco's meeting with Bob Filner in particular, and by this time, Irene McCormick, Bob Filner's former communications director, had gone to Donna Frye and told her what had happened to her at the hands of the mayor. And Donna asked Irene if she had a lawyer, because it sounded like she needed one. And she hooked Irene up with Marco Gonzalez, and Marco asked Irene, is it okay if I have a meeting with the mayor to talk about your issues? And she said okay, and Marco took Donna Frye with him. So it was Marco and Donna and Bob Filner, and that was it. And the meeting lasted 2 hours, and they confronted him on his treatment of Irene McCormick in particular and of women in general, and tried to find out what was going on with him and why was he behaving this way. And they said it went from uncomfortable to intimate to wacko. And the intimate part was Marco said that the mayor acknowledged a lot of this stuff. He acknowledged his anger issues and said that he had been in therapy and on a medication when he was in D.C., but not anymore. Now, I should say that I reached out to Bob Filner for this story, and I never heard back, so I didn't get a chance to ask him about these things.
One thing I wanted to sort of ask you about is that, this whole entire idea of them coming forward first, there's a way in which they got to control the narrative. But I think Filner, he helped them with that because he never came back with his own sort of narrative. So the problem is you had sort of one side casting and telling the story of what happened, and the other side became this lacuna, this place, this void of silence. And so, I mean, is there a sense that we still have some things unanswered because we don't know what was happening behind doors on the other side?
Yes, I think so. And the Donna, Marco, and Corey have a lot of questions about, did Bob Filner really go to get therapy? Did he really go to get this 2-week treatment that he said he went? Nobody really seems to know that.
But what's interesting is when you describe this meeting, it was a very similar trajectory to his resignation speech in that it started with apologies and ended with attacks. So what was it that tipped them over the edge to decide we have to go public?
Well, it was actually, believe it or not, it was KPBS was a big part of that. Things started, Donna and Marco and Corey used the term the universe. The universe had other plans when, they had, like I said before, they didn't want to go public. But they started, they submitted their letters to him to call for him to resign, and Corey Briggs's letter got out first, and I had it, and a couple of other reporters in town had it, and they started questioning Corey. And so at first they were just going to release Corey's letter, which was not about treatment of women; it was about corruption. But then they learned that KPBS was working on some things, and they decided they needed to get out in front of it.
Do you think that perhaps the whole issue of sexual harassment was like carrying water for a much bigger issue that many other people in City Hall were worried about in terms of his leadership style?
Well, that's an interesting question. Donna, certainly I lead the story with Donna's experience in basically Bob Filner's sham of a transparent government. She was basically, like I say in the story, a mannequin in a window display to try to show to people that he was going to be transparent and his government was going to be open, and that was definitely not the case. So there was that.
Certainly not the case towards the end.
That's right. Certainly there was that, and there were a lot of sort of nuts and bolts issues that nothing was getting done in the mayor's office as Bob, went after these very high-profile issues.
And I think one of the most telling quotes in your story was from Marco Gonzalez, who says, if the Republicans broke the scandal, they would do it in such a way we would be set back not just one election cycle, but the progressive movement would be set back a generation. So that helps to explain why he jumped in.
Well, not just that, but if Democrats knew that this was going on and protected one of their own, it's not just that it would be hypocritical, it would also look like they were protecting Filner, that they were letting him get away with a certain treatment of women in exchange for having a progressive in office. And that, it wouldn't just look bad for the Democratic Party, that would be bad.
Okay, well, obviously there's a lot more that could be said about this, and we will be hearing more about this on KPBS next week. But let's move on. From mayoral politics to community politics. This week, one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city, Barrio Logan, won what some see as an epic victory in a battle over how their community can develop. The struggle between the needs of the industry and the needs of residents. It's gone on for decades. But on Wednesday, the City Council voted for a community plan that limits the encroachment of industrial uses. So, Sandhya, paint us a picture of what this conflict was in the community. What did it actually look like?
Well, if you've ever sort of gone down to the Barrio Logan area, you know that it's this very small sort of slice of land wedged between the 5 freeway and the shipyards on the other side. And it is this incredibly mixed neighborhood. And by mixed, I mean it is both primarily Latino, people who came over there actually to work on the docks, Mexicans who were brought over during World War II to work on the docks and were granted citizenship. They make up its denizens. They're also, for the most part, low income, but it's also never been zoned correctly. Mm-hmm. It's always been this sort of mixed use, mishmash, hodgepodge, however you want to say it, where you've got industry next to businesses, and that has some real effects on pollution, on the health of residents, and on feelings by some activists in the community that they have been sort of left out, exposed to all of these kind of really bad, toxic things, and never protected with a community plan that would recognize resident space.
A lot of asthma among kids, for example, yeah.
But a lot of asthma.
But then a lot was at stake because industry includes shipbuilding, which is such an important part of San Diego's economy.
Absolutely. This is a huge tension between industry and, doing work for the Navy and then these residents. And in a certain sense, it's, Barrio Logan shouldn't be a neighborhood. It did come about sort of through this sort of historical accident, but it is. And somehow there has to be this reconciliation of residents and industry living together. And they've been working on this community plan for 5 years.
Decades, actually, on this problem. But the community plan for 5 years.
There hasn't been one for 30 years.
Right.
But for 5 years, the city has very specifically invested money into getting this community plan to happen. And they had it 93% agreed on. So it was so close to being there, but then came the sticking point of these few square blocks that nobody could reconcile.
So David Alvarez, city councilman, who is incidentally a candidate for mayor, came up with a compromise and explained how that compromise for these few blocks worked.
So these blocks are supposed to be a buffer zone that protect the shipyards from the residents. And the tension was what goes in that buffer zone. At some point, there was residential housing in it, and maritime industry said, you can't put residential housing. They're encroaching towards the shipyards. So Alvarez said, okay, we'll take that out. Residents and industry won't be able to go in the buffer zone. It'll be a true buffer zone. Industry was not happy with this, maritime industry particularly, because they see the conditional use permits they'll have to get to actually set up new businesses there as too onerous. And they say that this plan could bring about the demise of the shipbuilding industry.
So, Dave, what do you think this says about David Alvarez's candidacy, that he crafted a compromise that essentially industry and labor are not happy with?
I think this is big for him. This is something he can really hang his campaign on. I think he played a key role in this. This is a typical story as a city grows. you're always going to have your poorer parts of town, and those are the people that are going to have to be stuck next to the dirtiest industry. It happened, in Hunters Point in San Francisco is another example of it. And I think this is really kind of a huge victory for groups like the Environmental Health Coalition, who have been working in that neighborhood for years and years and years. They've had little successes in getting chrome plating businesses out of neighborhoods, but this was a big one.
And it was kind of a neighborhood versus sort of business paradigm that you see everywhere. That's been a lot talked about in San Diego and was particularly talked about in the Filner administration. Many say that him sort of tackling that paradigm and going to the side of neighborhoods was why he ended up getting elected. So even after Filner is gone, as we just spoke about, now we're moving forward and we're seeing a situation in which neighborhoods kind of won out against big business. And that's really unusual in a town like San Diego.
The key, sorry, Allison, but a key question for me is, you had Mark Kersey, City Council member Mark Kersey, saying this is a termination notice for some of these shipbuilding industry businesres, and that's what it comes down to. It was whether or not these supply companies, ancillary businesses that support the shipbuilding industry, whether or not they're going to continue operating, whether the shipbuilding industry can survive without them being in this small area.
But the thing is, though, all of the businesses that are already there are grandfathered in, and they're allowed to expand up to 20% of their business. So the question is about new businesses that might come in, which are allowed. You are allowed to have commercial interest in that space, but you have to go through a permitting process, which is basically regulation. So what the industry was worried about in the end was they just didn't want to be regulated in that space, and now they're going to be. So, once again, is this going to kill the shipbuilding industry, or is that a bit of hyperbole?
Because when you have to go through the conditional use permit process, that opens up the door for people to come in and complain and make their case.
Right.
I'm curious. I'm based in Los Angeles, and I've seen a lot of these issues around the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, where people are just squeezed, And public health sort of drove a lot of the changes they've made there. And is there something in this community plan that's specifically laid out for public health guidelines?
It's really just about zoning for the most part, but it all comes from a place of public health, right? Because of, you're 3 times more likely to get asthma in Barrio Logan. In fact, Alvarez, sort of one of his more, this is such a personal story for him. He grew up in Barrio Logan. He grew up between 2 machine plating, sandwiched between 2 machine plating businesses. And he was, telling the council that he has asthma. And as so many children who grew up in Barrio Logan do. We don't know if these things are connected, but when you see sort of patterns like this, there's some conclusions that can be drawn. So what this definitely is, it is about public health, and it is about ways in which the air in Barrio Logan had reached dangerous levels. It has been cleaned up a lot. But, again, it's competing interests because, houses can be in other places, but the ports, they got to be right there.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's move on to another issue that is health-related here. It's time to turn our attention to an issue that affects many families, especially these days. As our population ages, the number of assisted living homes in California has almost doubled in the last 2 decades. So for people who are choosing assisted living homes for their loved ones, it's particularly disturbing to hear how under-regulated they are in California. Many assisted living homes are excellent, but a San Diego UT watchdog investigation has uncovered some shocking cases of fatal neglect. So, Deborah Schock, you did this investigation. Why did you decide to take it on?
Well, somebody told me a long time ago that we should be checking out assisted living facilities. And so what we did was, I'm with the Center for Health Reporting at USC, and we teamed up with UT San Diego. And we thought it was going to take a couple of months. And instead, it's 6 months and still going.
So how safe would you say assisted living facilities are? Sort of give us a bit of a bigger picture.
Okay, that's tough to say because there's no statewide data. Based on what we found in here in San Diego, it's quite a range. There's some excellent homes, but there are some homes that clearly have had major problems. We're talking about deaths, injuries, sexual abuse, medication errors.
I think this is one of the main things that your series, your articles brought out was the very lax, it seems lax regulation compared to nursing homes. For example, how much of the fines if somebody is found to have committed a severe, possibly fatal case of neglect?
Well, in a nursing home, the fine can go up to $100,000. In assisted living, the top fine is $150.
Wow.
Yes.
So is California like all other states in the way it regulates assisted living?
Most states use their public health departments, their health departments to monitor assisted living. They see it more as a health facility. But here in California, they see it as a social, home, and therefore it's regulated by the Department of Social Services.
I want you just to give us an example of one of the cases so we get a sense of what you found and that got the $150 fine. Give us an example of one case.
Okay, we've had cases of a woman who bled to death at a local assisted living facility because the nurse did not come in time, did not recognize the call. And one of the biggest problems also is people not calling 911 when they need to. And we also have another case of a woman where the home wasn't fined, but she had dementia, so she wandered at night. The staff built a barricade of furniture around her bed. Of course, she tried to crawl over it, smashed her hip, smashed her head, died 6 weeks later. But in that case, the state said they didn't see a direct connection.
Well, the thing that really jumped out at me, Allison, you mentioned the difference between regulating nursing homes and regulating assisted living facilities. Was what purposes do these two industries serve? And in other words, when somebody goes to an assisted living facility, what are their expectations in terms of the care that they're going to get? Obviously, a nursing home is more intensive 24-hour care. Assisted living is they're living independently on their own. What responsibility do these facilities have to care for the people who live in them?
Okay, typically the facilities offer overall care. They help with medication. They offer meals. They might do laundry, and they're supposed to sort of watch out for the residents.
Yeah, that was the big thing. It was like a lot of these cases that, and by the way, the reporting is great. A lot of these cases involve neglect. Like, so somebody was, had fallen and they'd been left there on the floor for 2 days.
Exactly.
I wondered, are they supposed to be coming, every day to check on these people, or 2 times a day, or every 5 days? And
yes, and in that particular case, the home has stepped up its review, but there aren't any real strong guidelines like check at noon, check at 6 o'clock.
So is that part of the problem, that you have this kind of, it's not a fully defined thing, entity in and of itself?
Yes, I mean, originally assisted living homes were seen as sort of where people could be very independent. And over the years, there's been, people don't want to go to nursing homes. So they see assisted living as a good place to go. It's also a lot cheaper than nursing homes.
I was going to ask if some people may be doing assisted living who actually should be in nursing homes because of the cost.
Exactly. And the state is assisting this by they're giving permits to these homes, even the smallest ones, even the 6 beds, to take care of dementia patients, to take care of patients on hospice. And
So Deborah, you mentioned that the number of homes in your article, you mentioned the number of homes has doubled. Has the Department of Social Services, which is overseeing and regulating this industry, had its budget doubled?
Excellent question. No, they've had their budget cut back, and they used to inspect assisted living homes once every year. That was the law. The law now is they inspect once every 5 years.
So, I mean, Dave, what do you think about, as just a citizen of this state, do you feel like we have a right to demand more regulation, or should we be? How do we pay for more regulation? I guess
you're throwing this liberal a softball question. This comes down to the state budget and the battle over whether our taxes, the amount of money we're taxed, will adequately fund the services that we expect. When you in public opinion polling, when you ask people, should we cut our budget? They say, yes, cut our budget. But then when they ask you specific areas. Do you want this service cut? Do you want this service cut? Do you want this service cut? The answer is always no, 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 you can't cut that service. And I would imagine that this would be one of those things that people wouldn't want cut, but lo and behold, it's been cut.
And then also betrays and belies this other problem with an aging population and with sort of the economy the way it is, with less money to take care of that aging population. People who maybe should be getting a higher standard of care are going to be going into assisted an overburdening assisted living facilities, which then aren't going to be regulated. It just seems like more and more disasters waiting to happen.
And we found cases where homes held on to their residents for financial reasons.
Interesting.
Because they didn't want to, move them ahead to nursing homes when they should have.
Deborah, in the 1 minute we have left, what is the reaction from Sacramento? Have they paid attention to what you've discovered?
Pretty strong, very strong reaction, actually. We had a story 2 days after the series ended with the chair of the Social Services Committee saying he wants to look into this on the Senate side, and the chair of the Health Committee as well on both the Senate and Assembly side. And they said the fine was inadequate. They're very concerned about the number of inspections. So we could see some action in the next few months, I think.
And in just a few seconds, for people who are actually out there looking for an assisted living facility for their loved one right now, is there anything that they can do to protect against putting them in the wrong place?
Do lots of research. There's an organization that has a lot of the inspection records on time. Just dig. Be investigative reporters on this.
Good
Yes.
tip. Thank you so much. Well, that wraps up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank you, David Rowland, Deborah Shocks, and Sandia Dirks of KPBS for joining you. And all the stories are available at kpbs.org.